Alright, so right now we are almost ready with our application, but it's time for improvement. Okay, we have always a scope to improve our application, and right now we are done with the basic features and with our add, update, delete, insert, fetch, all these operations. So the next thing that we are going to do here, let's make our application to make a little bit of look stylish. Okay, let's style our application. Let's make the user experience good. This looks very plain, and obviously this is very plain HTML text you can see over here. So let's do the styling. Let's add CSS. Let's bring in Bootstrap. Let's make this application look cool. So that's the next task that we really need to do just right here. Okay, cool. So let's go forward. So first of all, before we get started, you can see two things. Right now my Eclipse is looking different because this is not, I'm not shooting this particular video in night. You can see this is Wednesday and 11:40 a.m. Okay, so yeah, yesterday I haven't got any chance to shoot the video. So yeah, so I'm shooting it on a Wednesday and it's 23 of December. It's morning. It's freezing here, as I told you previously, and it's kind of cold here, but yeah, it's okay right now. I do have around 2 hours slot, and I think to go for a 2-hour recording. Okay, so in between these 2 hours, I'll be obviously introducing a lot of stuff, and let's see how much we can progress, how much we can make this application look good. Okay. Cool. So all the themes of my Eclipse and maybe MySQL. If I'll go to MySQL, where is that? MySQL, where are you, man? Yeah, there you go. Let me bring this to here. So all these things right now looking different just because the theme changed. Okay, cool. So next thing is that let's create our own theme right now for our application. Let's not depend on the system specific theme that my Eclipse is changing for me. Right now, let me make this particular application look good. Okay. So before that, how to make our application look good? Obviously, you'll be telling me that Abhilash will using some CSS. Perfect. So let's go ahead and use some CSS. But before we go ahead and write our CSS code, one thing that we need to do, we basically need to write the CSS code inside a different file, and we have to load that particular CSS to this particular page. But how about we will start things from the scratch? Okay, let's say I do have a very simple requirement here, and I want to change the heading that I have here for Selenium Express. If I want to change the color of this particular text, maybe I want to change it to red. So how I'm going to do it? So obviously I'll go to source, main, web app, webinf, view, and obviously this page is student list. Let me go there, and here is my Selenium Express. So maybe I can write style here, style, and I will change the color to red, and let me go there, refresh the page, and the color is changed to red. We are done, isn't it? No, not basically. Okay, the problem with this kind of thing, when we basically hard code the things just right here, is not that user friendly or developer friendly, because it's going to make our code look messy. And one more thing, imagine I have one more heading here. Okay, so I have one more heading, maybe another H1 heading, and I want to align the same heading to center as well. And again, okay, so let me do Control S. Let me say align to center. Let me only say this thing, and let's say imagine that the heading that I want to give is let's say our application name, maybe student management. I'm going to remove it. I'm just doing it for testing purpose. So yeah, management, the spelling is wrong. Okay, so right now, okay, imagine if I'll do Control S and I want to refresh here, and I got another heading just right here, and let's say this is also a H1 heading, this is also an H1 heading. What I really want to convert all my H1 heading to look red. All my H1 heading colors should be red. Okay, if I want to do that, then how I'm going to do it? Obviously, again, I'll go there, and again, I'm going to write style here, So style, and again, I'm going to make the color to red. So I have this particular file come over here, do a refresh, and it's going to be converted to red. But let's say if I have 500 different h1 tag right here inside this particular file, or maybe imagine I have different h2 tag or h3 tag, and I want to convert all the h2 to look red. So how I'm going to do it? This is not good, right? I cannot hardcode the things just right here. Rather, what I can do, I can remove it from here. Let me remove this thing from here, and obviously this one from here. And I will, right now, if I'll go here, if I'll do refresh, you'll be seeing the color is changed back to the default one. And right now, another approach is I can come over here and I want to convert all the h1 tag to red. So here I can define the standard, and if I will be changing the color to red here for h1, now all the h1 color just right here, if we have couple more just right here, then everything will be changed to red. So to do that, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to write a tag here called style, and the style type will be text of CSS. And now make sure that I'm writing this style and style inside the head tag. You can say this head tag, and here it starts from here. All right, so now here I can write h1, and I can write here color, and the color will be red. Okay, Command S, right now go here, refresh the page, you'll be seeing both the h1 colors changed to red. Okay, so simple approach. But what about okay, so right now every h1 I'll be creating right here inside this particular file. Imagine I have one more just right here, maybe inside after the table, I'll say h1 here, and I will say below the table. Okay, just say demo text. If I'll go over here, and if I do a refresh, this color is also red because we are defining that property just right here. That sounds cool. This guy is working fine for a particular file. But imagine for my entire application, if I have different files, let's say in our student page, here also I have some h1 tag, and I want to convert them also to red. Now at that time, that is not going to work, okay, because whatever we are defining here, that is for this specific file. Okay, so it won't work with this particular file. Okay, our student page, or if we have any different files, different JSP file, this particular thing will not work for the other file. So we have to make sure something. That's why two disadvantage of writing this kind of code, we cannot apply it. Imagine I want to show you that. I know you guys understand, but imagine if I'll go to this particular file, and imagine I will change this h3 to h1. Okay, Command S obviously. Okay, and if I will load this particular page, how to load this particular page? Let me create one more browser window. Let me drag this to here, and I will copy this particular page. I'll go back there. I'll do Control B. What is the URL? Our student? No. What is the URL? Let me go to the controller. Source main Java controllers. This is my controller. Show our student page. Let me copy that. Close it. Change it to this URL. Enter. Well, see, right now we have this tag here, and I want to change that tag to red as well. So what I'm going to do right now, if I do a refresh here, everything is red because in this file I have retained this h1 just right here, but I want to apply this h1 to here as well, to here as well. So in that case, again, I'll go to student list and I'll copy this style and style. I'll copy that. I'll go back to the different page, and here I have to do the same thing inside head and head. Inside this, again, I'm going to do Control V, Command S, go there, refresh the page. Right now it is also changed to red. So why should I copy paste the same thing here and there again and again? And right now we have some simple piece of code, so it looks so easy right now. But what about if I have a long CSS script? I cannot write everything just right here inside my HTML code, because if I'll be writing all my CSS code here, imagine this is only for the h1 element. What about if I'll be styling my body? What about if I'll be styling my label? What about I'll be styling this form input? Then if I'll do all my styling just right here, the code will be looking messy, and we should not write our CSS code and HTML code together, because that's obviously make things complex. So what we basically do in real time, we will not write this kind of thing here. Also, we will not write this kind of thing here. So basically, let me do one thing. Let me remove all this thing, okay, from here as well, and from here as well. Okay, so there is no style tag here, or there is no style tag here. It looks pretty clean right now. And obviously, if I do refresh, this is gone. If I do refresh here, the color will be changed here as well. So what we basically do, that piece of code that I have written for that h1 tag, I'll move it to a different file. I'll be writing all my CSS inside a different file. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll be going to view. But in this view, I'm storing all my JSP pages. So what I'll be doing, I'll be going to this web app, and right here inside this web app, I'll be creating a new folder. Maybe I'll be creating a new folder called resources. I'll do finish, and here I'll be putting all my static resources, just like JavaScript, CSS, images, whatever I want to put, I'll be putting it just right here. So I'll be creating different folders here. Maybe one folder to store CSS file, I'll do CSS. One folder to store images. Let's say I want to have some background image for this application, or I want to display some images, where I'll store those images. So for that, let me have it here as well, images, finish. And one more I'll be creating, do right click, new, and I'll do folder, and the name I'll be giving as JS. Okay, so I'll be putting all my static resources here. All right, so the next thing that I'm gonna do here, I'll be going to the CSS folder. I'll do a right click, I'll go to new, and I'll be creating a new file. Okay, and obviously this is going to be a CSS file. So I will say my application, or what I'll say, my style sheet. .css. Okay, so let me do finish, and obviously I'll be putting all my CSS code just right here. Let me do a zip tag to move it to here. So here what I'm trying to do, I'm specifying all my CSS property just right here inside this particular file. So wherever I need to, imagine that right now I have only 3 lines of code here. Imagine I have a very long CSS script. Okay, I want to style everything, my h1, my body, my my table, my cell, my rows, and everything. Then obviously this CSS file will be a pretty huge one. And imagine if I want to load it, here, if I'll be loading that particular file here, then obviously all these properties will be changed, and their properties I can control right here inside this particular file. Let's say I also want to apply, imagine I have an h1 tag. I want to apply this h1 tag styling. I'm styling my h1 tag just right here. I'm making the color red. Imagine inside here, I have a couple of h1 tags. I want to change their color to red. So simply I'll be going here and I'll be loading this particular file, my style sheet, just right here. Okay, and imagine I have another file, and here also I have an h1 tag. And also obviously I'm working in an application, so I should be caring about the look and feel of my application, and I should feel that everywhere, if I do have any h1 tag in my application, all the h1 tags should be red, because just to be consistent. Okay, so right here, if I also want to do that, I can simply load this particular file just here. Okay, this particular file I can load it here, and this particular file I can load it here to change all these h1 tags which we have in different files. All these h1 tags will be converted to red. Okay, so that's a good thing. That's how we work in a real-time application. You will be seeing they will be separating the CSS code with the HTML code, and they'll be putting everything in a different file, and they'll be loading this particular file in each of their JSP file or HTML file just to make the HTML code look nice, or to style their HTML tags. Okay, so we are going to do the same thing right now. We have a file called mystylesheet.css. Let me close this particular file. We have put this particular file inside the CSS folder. Right now, let's load this particular file. Okay, let's load it right here. Okay, why I want to load it just right here? Because this couple of header tag I want to change their color to red. So if I'll do a refresh here, you can see these colors looks black, obviously a black color, the default color. Let me change it to red. So how I'm gonna do it? So obviously you'll be saying that, hey Vilas, load that particular file. So let's load it just right here. So I'll be coming over here and maybe I can use a link. Okay, this is going to be a link. I'll be using this to change, I'll be using this link to load that particular file. So how to load it? First of all, this is going to be a style sheet file. So I'll say rel, and this is going to be a style sheet because I want to load a style sheet file. So a style sheet. And the next one I'll be doing here, I should be doing here is, I should define the type as well. The type is going to be CSS text because it's going to be the type, and then I have to provide the href, and this href is obviously going to be the link basically from where I'll be loading the particular CSS file. So let's go ahead and let's write the href here. Let's write the link here to load this particular file right here. Okay, so let's do the loading stuff just right here inside the href. Alright, so right now let me provide the link here where exactly our CSS file is existing. We have to provide a link. Okay, we have to provide the URL. Okay, but forget about the URL right now. Where is our CSS file? Our CSS file is here. It's inside the CSS folder and it's inside the resources folder, the one that I have created. Okay, so if I will do a right click, copy qualified path, I'll do Control V here. So this file is under CSS, it's under resources. This is the one I have created, and before that whatever is there is not required for now. Let me remove it. Okay, so this is where the file I have created inside the resources folder, inside the CSS, inside the mystylesheet.css, isn't it? Cool. That sounds good. So the next thing that I'll be doing here, I'll be doing Control S. Okay, this should be text/CSS. The type should be text/CSS, and I'll do Control S. So right now, if everything should work fine, what do you think? What will happen? If everything will work fine, you tell me what will happen. Obviously, inside mystylesheet.css, inside this particular file, we have defined some CSS properties to style our h1. And obviously right here, I can understand that if it works fine, the h1 tag of this particular file will be changed because here we are defining our CSS file, isn't it? So right now here is our h1 and here is our h1. Okay, the look and feel of this thing should be changed. So let me do Control S. Let me go to this particular page. Let me do a refresh. Nothing happened. The color of this and the color of this actually didn't change. Okay, why it's not changing? That means this particular property is not working. But this property was working previously whenever we are putting it directly right here inside the head and head. But right now I'm doing the same thing inside this head and head. Instead of hard coding the things just right here, I'm trying to load the file. Okay, I'm trying to load my mystylesheet.css file, and inside this particular file I did put the property. And if I should load it properly, then this particular h1 tag should change the color and it should work good, isn't it? Now, why it is not working? What is the problem? Let's talk about it. Okay, now first of all, let me do one thing. Let me copy this URL. Let me first see whether this particular file is loading or not, whether we are able to successfully load it or not. So to show you that, I'll go back to one of my browser. Let me go to Google Chrome and let me do Command V, enter. Okay, so now my URL is working fine and obviously my server is up, so I can see the file. One thing I'll do right click. I can write inspect. I can go to inspect, or you can click on here. You can go to more tools, developer tool, and there you go. I want to view it. Just right here in the bottom, and right here I'll go to the network tab and let me hit this particular URL. If I'll be hitting this URL, what it really does mean that if I'll do enter, you can see there are a few things. When I am basically hitting this URL, a request is going to my server, and for this URL, whatever the files I have, I am trying to load it. Okay, I'm trying to load it just right here. So in my response, you can see the show student. This is basically giving me this particular page. If you click on preview, this is the page I'm getting back. If I'll go to response, so this is basically the response. This is basically the response is I'm getting just right here. You can see this is the response I'm getting right here. Obviously, this is the page I'm returning to my user whenever he is hitting this link, isn't it? Whenever he is hitting this URL, obviously I'm trying to handle it my handler method, and I'm returning him a JSP page, and this is that JSP page. This is what I'm getting in the response for show student. For this show student URL, this is the response I'm getting. But what about my style sheet? Because when somebody is going to hit this URL, okay, a request goes to the server, and server will give you the response back. So with that response, everything will come. My JSP page will come, my JS file will come, my CSS file will come, my images will come. Whatever server will be sending to me, everything I'll be getting here. But it looks like it is sending me the CSS file as well, which is my stylesheet.css, but it is in red. That means something crazy is happening. Something crazy. What is really happening here? If I click here, you can see if I'll go to header, it is giving me 404. That means this, if I click here, you can see the status code is 200. That means this particular URL is returning a JSP page. Okay, this particular URL, this is giving me this response, and it is loading fine. That's why the status code is 200. But for my stylesheet.css, this guy is not loading. Okay, and that's why the status code is 404, and that's why basically we are not able to load this particular CSS file. As we are not able to load the CSS file just right here, the text of this and the text of this is not getting changed to red color because the file itself is not loading. The my style sheet is not loading. So we need to look at that. Now look at the request URL. So right now, if you see, the URL is resources css mystylesheet.css. Well, right here, this particular file is inside CSS, and it's inside resources. Okay, this is what is happening here. It's trying to look inside resources css mystylesheet.css. Pretty fine, but we do not have our context name just right here, isn't it? Where is our context name? Okay, where is our context name? The context name is student management. Let me copy the student management just right here. This is our page context, obviously, and I told you about it previously. Copy that context name, go back to our file, and before this resources, let me do Command V, and let me remove one more thing. So right now I'm telling you that go ahead Spring. This is my context name to reach inside the project. Obviously, if you'll go here, right click, if you'll go to properties, and if you'll go to web project setting, you can see the context root is this for my project. So every URL you are hitting, you can see the URL you are hitting is starting from this, isn't it? See, the URL you are hitting is show student is starting from student management. This is your project name and as well as your context root. Okay, for this our student page, see, you have the context name. So for every link, you should have the context name first to identify where actually that particular resource is present. So right now, let me close it. For my style sheet, where is that? For here also, we have to specify the context name because we have a href. This is a link, and I'm telling that, okay, inside this particular file right now, inside this particular project, look it inside the resources folder. Look at just right here, and inside that we have CSS, and inside that we have my style sheet just right here, and please load it. Okay, now let me do Control S right now. Let me go to the Chrome browser. Where is it? Chrome browser. Let me go there and let me do enter again, and let's see whether this time I'm able to load this particular file so that my text color of this and this will be changed. Okay, let me do enter. So see the previous URL, we do not have our page context here, isn't it? So let me do enter right now. Well, still is not changed to rate. And obviously you can see for my style says the status is 404 again. Let me click here. Well, this looks like the context path is added right now. So it is going to look inside student management and here resources and CSS and my style sheet. But still it is not working. Okay, why? Because right now the URL kind of looks fine. Maybe it is going to look inside this, but still it is not able to locate the file. Why is that? Okay, so here is one thing. I want to explain you what is the problem right here. Okay, so now let's go for that and let's make it work. So let's make this particular URL work. Okay, let me tell you about that right now. Alright, so the things so far are not working, and obviously this href that we have right here is obviously not detecting my style set.css, and the problem is pretty visible. Okay guys, just think right here. Okay, what do you mean by href? What do you mean by this guy? If I hover over here, what do you mean by that? Obviously you can see the data type is URI, so it is thinking that this is an URL. Slash student management slash resources. There is an URL present here for this, but we have not created any URL for this. This looks like we are trying to give the path. We are just trying to specify the path here, but we are putting it inside an href. Href is just like an URL, isn't it? Now we have to provide a URL just right here inside the href. So basically, if you see the other thing, right now you are writing student management slash resources. Do you have any URL created, a pattern created, which is going to be looking just like this? Do you have any URL pattern like this so far? No, you do not have it. You have not created any handler method for this. For an example, if you'll go to my student controller, this is your URL. This is your handler method, isn't it? This is your handler method. You are creating this URL right now. That's why you are able to hit that URL right here. If I'll go to your Google Chrome, you are hitting student management slash student. Why you are hitting it? Because you have created a handler for this show student. If I'll go back to your Eclipse, where is your Eclipse? Right here, you have created a handler method which is going to return this particular file, and obviously where this particular file is located. This particular file is located inside the webinf view. Inside this particular, we have the student list, and for that you have returned a view resolver in the configuration file. Right here, you have specified that where to look so that it is basically locating this particular file, our student, isn't it? Obviously, I know you understand it. But right now the problem here is, if I will close the controller, if I'll just see here, we are putting our href, we are saying, okay, this is our URL pattern, slash student management slash resources. So we have a handler method for that, but we do not have it. So we are going to create one, and we have to tell that what does this resources means. Now this resources means this particular folder. Okay, don't think that this is the folder name. I can write anything just right here. Let me not confuse you by telling you all these things. What I'm gonna do, okay, so I have path till this, right? CSS, my style sheet.css. Inside CSS, I have my style sheet, isn't it? Okay, cool. So this is my file. This is my style sheet file, and we have to look for this CSS file inside the resources folder, and obviously this is the folder that I have created. You can give any name to this. Okay, so right now what I'm gonna do, I'll go to my configuration file, and just like I've specified the path here for my view file, I'll be specifying the path for the static resources. Just like if I want to load any CSS file or JS file or images file, I can give the path just right here, that inside which folder I need to look for that particular file. And obviously if I will look for my CSS, I'll be looking inside the resources folder. If I will be looking for any images, that will be inside the resources folder. If I'll be looking for any JS file, that should be inside this JS file folder. So to reach this particular folder, I have to create a path for this, and I have to say that you have to look inside this particular folder. Okay, and to do that, what we need to do, we have a very good way of doing this thing. Obviously, we have to override a method, and which is the class? Which is the class? I do not remember which class I have to implement or extend, because we have to just override a method from that particular class. Can I do Command Shift T? I don't remember. I just remember something like configure. This is an interface, I believe. MVC configure or something. Can I do MVC dash dot MVC? Let me do star MVC. Yeah, this is the one. Web MVC configure. We have to implement this particular class. Sorry, interface. Let me go there and let me say implements. What is that? Web MVC configure, and that's it. So right now inside this web MVC configure, we have a lot of different. We have tons of feature. Okay. Right now we will be using one of its feature. If we do Command Shift O, these are all the methods that we have inside this particular web MVC configure interface. The one that I'm interested for is obviously this is to add formatter. Yeah, there you go. This is the method we have to use. This is called add resources handlers. Alright, so right now if you are going to read the description for the add resources handlers method, obviously this is a default method. You know that we can have default methods with a body inside an interface. So basically we can override this particular method and we can use it for our purpose. Okay, and for an example, when we should be using this particular method and why I should be using this particular method, the text is just in front of you. So the Spring developers are saying add handlers to serve static resources such as images, JS, and CSS file from a specific location under a web application root, the class path, and others. So our web application root is obviously what? Our root is this guy, student management. Okay, so basically from the root, we can be able to add static resources such as images, JS, and CSS file from a specific locations, okay, under the web application root. So our location is what? Where we are keeping our files. Our location is here, resources, okay. But how to reach here? How to reach this resources folder? For that, we have to define a mapping. We have to define a handler. We have to create a URL for that. How to reach here? So once we reach here, from here to here, once we reach here, inside that, we can look inside the CSS to load CSS file. We can look inside the images folder to load the images folder. We can look inside the JS to load JS. Okay. So how to reach here? Okay. So for that, we can add a location. Okay. This particular guy, handler, add resources handlers, is going to define, is going to give us some feature by using what? We can define the location. So let me go ahead and let me do that. Okay, so now for an example, let me close this. I am inside my student app config. Right now it's implementing this interface. So let me override that particular method, that is add resource handlers. Right now let me do enter. This is going to override the method. Let me delete all the default text that it is giving me. And right here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say registry. Okay, registry is the object of resource handler registry. So this registry is right now going to help us to register our URL that we'll be creating for our resources folder. Okay, so let me go ahead and do it. And if you can, anytime you can hover over here and you can read, how it is going to help you. Is saying here, stores the registration of resources handlers for serving static resources such as images, CSS, and files, and other through the Spring MVC, including setting cache, blah blah blah. And I really don't want to read all this thing, but you can see one thing: to create a resource handler. Okay, to create a resource handler, use add resources handler method. There is another method here called add resource handler, and this method is going to help us to create a URL for this kind of folder. Okay, so let me tell you without reading this, without confusing you, let me do this particular method called add resource handler. Let me click here, and this is going to help me to create an URL, and this URL I can pass that right there inside where? Inside this href. For href, we'll be needing an URL, right? And this URL is going to be how I'm going to reach here, because here inside this href I have to tell the URL for this resources folder, so that we can reach here. Okay, so before this we have to write my URL here. Okay, maybe I can say URL to reach resources folder. Okay, I have to create a URL just like this. Okay, so how to create that? Let me copy. This is the URL I want to create, right? So this URL is going to help me to reach here. Till here I can reach. This is the folder I have created, and inside this particular folder I'm putting all these files, right? And all these folders. So how to reach here? So let me create this URL to reach resources folder. Let me copy that. Let me go back to student auth config. Let me do Control V. So this is the path I want to create, and obviously after that I can do ** because this URL is going to help me to reach the resources folder, and obviously inside the resources folder I have different files like I have different folders like CSS, images, JS, and inside this CSS I have one particular file, and we will be able to load this particular file. So this is only to reach till this. Okay, and after that we'll be specifying our own patterns, and I'll be telling you that, and that's why I'm writing **, because after this there could be anything. Okay, but with this much we'll be reaching till this. Okay, and then we'll be doing one more thing. This is going to be the resource handler, this is going to be the URL, and let me do enter here to break this line, and one more line, do dot, and here I'll be adding the resource location, and obviously you know what is going to be the location. This particular URL, for this I want to map this location, resources. Okay, so slash, make sure my spelling is correct, I do a lot of typo, resource. Let me do one thing, right click, rename. What is that? Rename. You might be thinking what Abhilash is doing right now. He's just copy pasting the name of this guy. Yes, because I don't trust my spelling. I don't want to have typo. Let me write resources. Okay, so there you go. So this is what I want to do. So for the resource location, which name is resources, for this right now I have created a mapping called URL to reach resource folder. Now I can copy this URL from here, and right now I will go to my student list, and obviously I have already pasted it. So right now what I really mean that inside this folder I have the CSS folder just right here, and inside this I have my style sheet. Okay, so this will help you, or this is pointing to this particular folder. Okay, under this, but obviously you can see this is also not going to work. Let me do Control S. My server is already starting, right? Let me go back to here, and let me do enter, and still you can see the color is not changed, and obviously again I'm getting a 404 right now. So let me go here and let's see what is the problem. So URL to reach a resources folder, which is perfect, and then /CSS, then / my style sheet, but here I am missing my context root. See, for this URL, what is the context root? Student management, isn't it? So I have to add my context root also. So let me copy my context root, copy the context root from here, and just like for any other URL, for this URL also I'll be looking for this URL inside the context root, isn't it? From here, inside here I'll be looking inside the resources folder. So what is pointing to this one? What is the context root? The context root is obviously student management, whatever I copied from there. Let me copy from here, copy that, do cancel. Before that, do Control B and do another slash, and there you go. Let me do Command S, finger crossed. Let me go back to here, let me enter. Well, nothing is happening. Let me do an enter here, enter, and still it is not loading. and still the file is not loading just right here. And let me see what's wrong right here right now. So still we are getting a 404, and it is saying student management. Inside this right now URL to reach resources folder. Now it is looking inside the CSS, and it is looking inside this, but this particular path is not working. Why is that? Let's look for the fix right now. All right, so this should have worked. This should have load my style sheet file from this URL, because this URL is pointing to resources folder, and inside the resources folder I have this particular folders and files. Then it should have worked, but why it is not working? Let me go to my Eclipse and let's see what's the issue. Oh well, for this maybe this particular thing is not saved. Let me do Control S to save this particular file, and let me wait till it's reload my changes. So right now it's completed. Let me go there. Let me do enter again. Boom. We got this particular file loaded, isn't it? And I really don't want to open it in a different file. Let me do a enter here. And you can see right now, green, all green man is 200 success. Congrats. You are successfully able to load your CSS file in a Spring MVC application, and you know that how to add the static resources just like JavaScript, CSS, images from into your application. Okay, you might be telling me right now, hey Vilash, right now you only told me how to load a CSS file. You haven't told me yet how to load images to our application. Well, it's going to be pretty similar. So let's do one work. Okay, let's try to add one more static resource. Okay, imagine one thing. I want to display an image here. Okay, I have downloaded few images for you. Okay, where are those images? Okay, there are a couple of images I have downloaded for you. Let me change the name of this particular image first. Rename, and I'll say student.png. Okay, so let's say this is an image. Okay, and let's say I want to add this particular image to my web page just right here. To here I want to add that particular image. So how I'm gonna do it? Okay, this is my database. Okay, I want to add the image to here. Okay, so just right here, just under this, I want to add that image, or just before this I want to add that image. I want to add some static resources just like CSS to my application. So how I'm gonna do it? So for that, again, go back to your Eclipse. Okay, and right now this is your CSS file, just like we have created one more for your images. Let me do a Control V here to paste your image. So this is the image that I have downloaded from the web, and right now I want this image to be shown inside the student list.jsp. First of all, let me remove this h1 tag. This is just for showing you. So let me remove that. Let me go back to the table, and maybe just after the table I want to have a image, and just right here the alt is going to be the image text. Let me say PEC students photo or something. Okay, right now it's important src. Now let me create the URL. Okay, first tell me how you're going to write your URL. So you are going to start from the root. Okay, what is your context root? Let me go to the properties. Let me go to the context root. Let me copy that context root. Make sure that I'm copying it from the web project setting. So this is from here only my project URL started. So let me do Control V here. Okay, so right now inside the context root, I'm going to look inside a folder called resources, because inside resources only I have different folders like CSS, images, and JS. Okay, so I have to look inside this particular folder. For this, I have already created an URL. What is that URL? Let me go to the config file. Well, this is the URL. This is the URL to reach the resources folder. So I can copy that, and I can go back to student list.jsp, and I can paste it. I can paste that particular URL just right here. Okay, so now I am inside my resources folder. Okay, so I reached here right now. So from here I want to go to my images folder. So I'll be writing images here. I'll be writing images here. Now inside this images folder, I have one more picture called student.png. Let me write here student.png. Okay, command S right now, and let me try to load this particular image and let's see whether it is working or not. So let me go back to here. Let me do a refresh and something here. First of all, you can see the student PNG is loading fine, and you can see your student is just right here, and you have successfully loaded an image to your application. Congrats. And if you do it full screen, if we will go to here, you can see whenever we are hitting this URL, whenever you are hitting this URL, this is the request going to the server, and the server is giving us a response. Inside the response, this is the page coming. If I'm going to go to preview, this is the page which is coming, and if you click on the response, obviously these are the file that we have written. This is coming as a response, so that we are getting this particular thing right here in our web page. Okay, and just like that, if I click on my style sheet.css, this is giving you this as a response, so that you are able to change the color of that particular header. And just like that, you are getting also an image. This is the preview of the image, and if I going to see on the response, obviously this is the image directly coming from your server. Your server, your Tomcat, is going to give you this particular image while somebody is going to hit this URL. So all the static resources that this particular page will be needing, just like a image file, just like a CSS file, just like the JSP file, just like the JS file, everything you have used for this particular page, whenever you are hitting that request, all those things will be given back to you by the server. The server will give everything in the response. So all the files will be loaded here, and this is your complete page. And that's why, if you remember, people always recommend you, hey, try to always work with the performance tuning. Okay, don't try to use so many images, so many CSS file, so many JS file, the JS file for a particular, because whenever you're going to hit this request, the server will give you all the response back. Inside the response, the JS file will be there, the CSS file will be there, the images file will be there. And if your page, whenever do enter, is going to the server, it's giving every file to you, and obviously everything is happening over the web. Right now, it is just a simple application. I have hosted everything inside my server, so you are seeing that it is pretty fast. But what about it is from a remote server? Then obviously there should be it should take time to load all these resources, isn't it? And obviously it is going to take much time if you have much resources. Okay, so always take that into the consideration whenever you are creating your website. Okay, so I hope that it is making sense. Guys, is it making sense? Why we really need to care about how many images we are sending, how many JS file we are sending, or how many JS file this particular page need, how many images this particular page need, how many CSS file this particular page needs. We always need to take care about that because imagine right now I'm hosting where I have hosted this image. Inside my application. Where is my application? My application is here. This is my JS file. This is my CSS file, and this is my HTML file or JSP file. Okay, so whenever a request is coming, let's say this file is loading inside this particular file. Whatever the resources I have here, all these resources will go with this particular file only. Now imagine right now I have hosted this application inside a server called Tomcat. This Tomcat is where? It's inside my own machine, right? That's why it is pretty fast right now. Whenever I'll be going to your Google Chrome, whenever I'm hitting this, all these things I'm seeing right here in front of me, I feel okay, it's pretty quick, man, it's so fast. Okay, but think about an application that you will be creating. Obviously, you will not be putting that application inside your own computer, isn't it? You will be putting that application inside a server. And you will be, where from you'll be getting that server? Maybe you'll go to GoDaddy, Bluehost, or some kind of hosting company. You'll go to them, you'll will actually give them some money. They will give you a server. Server means just a computer, and you will be putting your application inside their server. Or maybe your company should have their own server, so you'll be putting your application on that server. And at that time, I'll be the user. Okay, this is my computer. Somebody, imagine you will have a different this is a server. Okay, this computer that I'm working on, the one that you are seeing right now, that is your computer. Okay, you are hitting this URL, show student. This is the server. This server is always on. Imagine I have this computer just right here. Inside this particular computer, I have the files. Okay, I have deployed your application just right here. This computer is on for 24/7. Now you did hit a request. That request will come to here. Okay, and the request will come through the web. That's depend on the internet speed. Okay, now this server will give a response back, and obviously the data will go from here to there, and then only you will be seeing this particular page, isn't it? Now to make that happen, it takes time. Client, server, request will come from there to here. Then again, here to there, the response will go. Request, response, coming and going there. It is obviously going to take time, guys, because everything happens over the internet, over the HTTP, and the user should have a good connection to load all these particular resources, the CSS file, the JS file, the images file. So you have to always think about that whenever you are building an application, okay? Because end of the day, when somebody is going to hit an URL, the CSS, the image, the HTML file, everything will be loaded. So PNG, style sheet, document, take care of that. All right, so you really have to take care of everything, right? You have to see whenever a user is basically loading an URL, obviously how many things it is also loading simultaneously. Not only this page is coming, to style this page, what is the CSS file is coming, how long the CSS file is taking to load. You can see just right here. See here, the CSS is right here, is loading inside is taking 3 milliseconds to load. The image just right here is taking 5 milliseconds to load. The source student is taking 11 milliseconds to load. All right. So basically, whenever somebody is really loading this particular page, it really takes time to load, and all the resources that you have right here, it is actually taking time to load. Imagine right now you have only one CSS file is used by this particular page. Let's imagine that, okay, to style the table, I am using another different CSS file. Maybe I have 10 different images just like this, what will be shown just right here inside this particular page. So maybe if I have so many resources, imagine right now we have 3 resources. Let's say somebody, whenever he is hitting this URL, I'm basically returning 500 resources, or this particular page is loading 500 different resources, and obviously all those resources will take time to load. Just right here, see, right now this is taking this much millisecond, this is taking this much millisecond, obviously this is taking 0 millisecond. You might be wondering, every time last time it was 5 millisecond, why it is 0 millisecond right now? You cannot tell that how much of time it is actually going to take. Every time you are going to hit it, you are going to see something really crazy is happening, but you can come up with a standard. Okay, there is not much difference between 5 millisecond but 10 millisecond, but there is a difference between 5 millisecond and maybe 35 millisecond. Okay, you can feel that. Okay, how much time this particular page is taking to load all depends on how many resources is getting returned by the server, because whenever the server will give you back the resources, it needs the internet speed. So you have to make sure that your page should be loaded under 10 seconds or 10 seconds is pretty much. Your website should load, should be below 3 seconds or 2 seconds. Okay, so all these things you have to take it into the consideration if you want to make your website speed better, because obviously each resources takes time. When somebody is hitting this URL, okay, it's not only he does not know what is happening behind the scene, but we know that when somebody is hitting this URL, we are going to this particular page called /showstudent, and inside this we are making some DB call, and it is going to your DB. We are writing a query to fetch records from our DB, and then we are showing that record to the website user, and obviously this query will be run. So obviously again your application is going to fire this query. So this query will again go to your DB, inside your DB, it will run that particular query. Your DB should also take some time to retrieve those data. What is that time? And obviously after that, that thing will be returned to your controller. Where is your controller? It will go to your controller. Then again, your controller will give you back this particular page. Whenever this particular page loads, just like here, whenever that particular page loads, it also will have different kind of resources, just like the CSS, just like the PNG, the images, and maybe right now one CSS, maybe this particular page would have used 10 different CSS file. At that time also you need to think, okay, if this particular page is using 10 different CSS file, then maybe if it is taking more time, you can think about, okay, can I come up with a minified version? Well, that's another topic for another episode, but minified version, you can imagine like if this particular page is loading 10 different CSS file, okay? So for 10 different CSS file, it is taking pretty much time to load. So what about okay, there are 10 different files. So can I club up all the files together? Can I create one particular CSS file? And can I put all the different contents that I have inside 10 different files into one file, so that my server will only give one file to this particular browser, and my browser will only load that one particular CSS file. It won't load 10 files right now. It will be loading one file, because all the 10 file contents I'll be put inside one particular file. And that's what we call a minified version of the CSS, okay? Because instead of 10, we have to load only one particular file when somebody is going to hit this request. So all this type of things, all different kind of performance tuning we can do to make our website load faster. We can minify the CSS, we can minimize the number of images. We really need to consider that how many images we are loading just right here in the site. Can I minimize the number of images? I need to compress the images. Do not load the images which is 20 MB or 15 MB in size. Compress them, then only use the compressed image, so that image size will be around 20 KB or 30 KB, so it will be loaded first, because in the end it always depends on the internet connection to load all these resources, okay? That's how the thing works. You know about it. Whenever we hit this, all the resources that we are having based on the internet connection, so that we'll be able to download, my browser should be able to download this PNG, this CSS, or some other files, so that it can show everything inside the web page. Right now we are using localhost. Our Tomcat server is there in the local. That's why the speed is good, okay? What about if we'll go to seleniumexpress.com, okay? Let's say if you're going to Selenium Express, if you're going to click on this is there inside a different server, but see how fast it's loaded, because I have worked with the performance tuning of this application. Okay, so you have to take that thing in the mind, and you have to see how faster your application loads. And obviously I'm telling you all these things because the static resources like CSS, images, JavaScript, it really means a lot, and that will impact your application loading speed. So make sure whenever you are using all the static resources, you have to put that thing in the mind and work accordingly. Don't just try to make your application look so fancy so that you'll be going for so many images, so many CSS file. Don't do that, okay? I don't know whether this talk was necessary, but yeah, I feel that this is kind of going to create an impact on your mind, so that you can keep that thing on mind whenever you are creating some quality application in future. Yeah, so let's go for the next thing. All right, so guys, I was about to stop this recording, but I feel this is necessary to tell you. Not really necessary, but just give you some kind of real-time foundation or fundamentals. Guys, I have told you about loading the resources. You really have to take care of them, isn't it? So I will show you something. Always go, let's say you are creating a web application, and that application is there inside Amazon or GoDaddy or inside Bluehost. You have purchased a server, and inside that server you are going to deploy your application, or you have your company server or whatever. Okay, so if you want to see the load time which is taken by your whenever somebody is hitting that URL, and obviously the resources are getting downloaded to your web browser, and obviously at last, once the resources are downloaded, you are going to see the web page. So how much time it is taking to load all the resources which is coming from your server, and how fast your website is loading. To see that, you can use different websites. I'll be telling you a few, and I'll be doing some experiment with my website only. Let me go to Chrome. Maybe I have shown you the Selenium Express website, isn't it? So if you'll go to my website, you can see it is loading so fast right now. And basically, if you are going to go here to more tools, developer tools here. Okay, let me do some experiment on my website itself. Okay, because I know that you cannot hack it. I'm not so confident, I'm sorry. What about, tomorrow somebody is going to hack my website and going to say, Abhilash, challenge accepted. No. As a dev, I always fear I cannot make, a 100% quality application. But yes, I can take all the protection, okay? So that to hack my application, you have to go through a top deal. You have to go through a, you have to give Agni Pariksha for that. Okay, then only you can hack my application. Well, I can show you in this application. You can go to the network tab. Whenever you are going to hit this URL, you can see right now how many things this particular website is loading. See how many files we have just right here, and you can see for everything there are some amount of time it is taking for every file is load. Okay, you can see how many style sheet we have, how many scripts we have. The scripts are JavaScript. How many images we have, how many GIF file we have. There's so many things here, isn't it? How many images we have. You can see everything just right here, and everything takes time. Okay, so basically you really have to take care about the tuning of your application, because all these things takes time. And if you want to test the performance of an application, you can go to a website called GTmetrix. Or there are also different websites are there. You can go to here, you can click on GTmetrix, you can put your website name just right here. Maybe the website name of mine is http://seleniumexpress.com. Copy that, come here, do Control V just right here. Control A, Control B to enter. Now it is going to analyze your site and tell you that how much time it is taking to load your website. Okay, so obviously it is going to take some time, and then it is going to scan my website and it will see that how much time it is taking to load. Okay, and loading time, obviously, as I told you, depends on different factors, because once you give a request, the server will send everything, all your CSS, JS, images. So you really need to think about how to make a tuning of that. So you can see right now, right now it looks like it's giving the performance as D. Just recently I have tested my website. It was working really good, but right now see the performance. Okay, you can see it is telling me okay, improve this particular things, how much time you can improve. Okay, what to improve, what not to improve. If you go to waterfall, it will tell you that how much time these CSS files are taking to load. What is the size of the CSS file? Maybe I can think about combining these three CSS file. I'll put their code inside one particular CSS file, and I can make it a minified version of that, and so that the load time of these three files will be increased to obviously it will be increased, because I don't have to load, let's say, instead of all these 5, I'll be only loading one CSS file. I'll be put all this code inside one CSS file, and I'll create a minified version of that. Okay, so maybe I can do that, so that this performance, the time it is going to take to load my files will be improved. So yeah, this is basically very time to time, but you can, if I'll do test again, maybe it will see. It will tell me, okay, you have a good speed of your website. And there is another one website called pingdom.com, maybe pingdom. Maybe you can go to pingdom. Right here also you can test your website speed. So different platforms. So you can, no, I want pingdom. I'll tell you the website name, pingdom speed test. I will go to pingdom tools. Yeah, that one. Just give your URL just right here, and you can test from. And right here, if you are going to do that, it is going to give you the performance of your website, that how much time it is taking to load, and it is going to run for your test, and it is going to show me that okay, it is taking this much time to load your website. So you improve this one or improve that one, everything it is going to tell right here. So you can see the performance score it is giving me as of now is 76. That's C, so that is always a scope to improve. And my page size is really huge right now. It's 1.3 MB, and this is because of all those files that I'm loading, the CSS, JS, HTML and everything. I can remove this one. There are 48 requests has been made from the client to the server. My browser is making 48 different requests. Why? Because every time you are going to load a file, let's say this particular page is using 30 different CSS. So every time it is going to make a request to my server to load a CSS file. Imagine if you are going to see my JSP file right now. If I'll go to Eclipse, see my JSP file right now. Imagine I have a CSS file. Maybe I'll go here. I have a CSS file. This is a new request. This is a different URL. Okay, maybe if I'll go to my image, this is a new request. This is a different URL. So whenever this particular file will be loading, obviously it will make all those requests, and again a request come to my server, and the server will give back this particular images, this particular CSS file. So it is going to make many requests to my server. So more requests it makes, the more is going to be the load time for you. So that's why I'm telling everything in this lecture only. So you have to see that how many requests your page is making. Okay, so how many links, how many URLs you have inside your file itself, or how many images you have. Because if you have these images, if you'll click on this particular file, if you'll go to the response, you can see if you'll drag here, see you are trying to make a server call right here. Okay, and also if you'll go all the way to down, this is the SRC, this is an URL. Again, you are making a different call. So you have to take this thing as mine, and you have to make sure that the request should not be more than 40 or 50, and the load time is 3.38 seconds. Maybe I can make it below 2 seconds, then it will be more faster, and the performance grade is also going to be increased. So make sure your website should load under 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Okay, and these are the things it is telling me to make it good, make pure HTTP request. But right now I'm making 48 requests. My server is making around, my client, whenever I'm hitting this URL, seleniumexpress.com, it is making 48 requests. 48 times it is hitting the server. Maybe I can decrease it to 30, so the pure request will be made, and obviously my performance will be increased. Okay, so obviously this is something that I want to tell you is really not needed, but yeah, I don't know why I want to tell it. But anyhow, I'm done. Yeah, thank you very much. Let's go to our topic, and let's talk about that right now.